So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. I'm Adi Cooper. I'm the Care and Health Improvement Advisor leading on safeguarding adults for the Care and Health Improvement Programme at the LGA. I want to welcome everyone this afternoon to this webinar on making every adult matter and every contact count, safeguarding people experiencing homelessness. I'm aware that people are still joining the webinar, so I might talk quite slowly whilst people continue to log in. We have over 400 people registered, and at the bottom of my screen it says 175 people are currently logged in. So I think we will be expecting people to join over the next few minutes. I'm going to say this several times that please, delegates, people who are attending this webinar, please put your questions in the Q&A function, and Michael will pull them together when we come to the discussion section of this afternoon's session. The slides and the recordings will be available on the LGA website after this event, so you will be able to access all the slides and also a recording of this session. As with all the previous sessions, they're available on the LGA website. So I'm just going to say a few words about the background to this event. This is a series of virtual seminars which builds on work that we previously undertook about adult safeguarding and homelessness. So in 2019, 2020, we held 4 workshops nationally on adult safeguarding and homelessness, and those were organised through the Care and Health Improvement Programme. Those workshops brought together people from across the country, across organisations from different sectors, to talk and listen to speakers and discuss issues regarding safeguarding people experiencing homelessness. And the outcomes of those 4 workshops were published in a briefing by Michael Preston-Shute, who's on the call and has organised these events with me today. And that document is available on the Local Government Association website. It's a joint publication with the Local Government Association and the Directors for Adult Social Services. And it's a briefing on positive practice in homelessness and adult safeguarding. So originally, before the COVID pandemic, we'd planned to use the briefing as a way of supporting local discussions at regional levels and debate about homelessness and adult safeguarding. Unfortunately, COVID changed that, but fortunately we had an alternative, which was to organise this series of webinars. We discussed with members of a reference group. We've had an expert reference group or advisory group supporting us in this work, and we talked to them about what would be the best way forward, given that we didn't know how long COVID was going to last and what impact it would have. And what they suggested and what we've organised is a series of 8 webinars, of which this is the 8th, on a range of themes. So today's webinar is around making every adult matter and making every contact count, and I'll talk about the people who we've got presenting this afternoon. But I just want to say a bit about the objectives of today, which are the same as the objectives on the previous webinars. So really what we wanted to do through this series of 8 sessions was to share information, particularly around good practice, positive practice in this area of work, adult safeguarding and homelessness, people experiencing homelessness, but also to provide an opportunity to understand how safeguarding people experiencing homelessness might have changed this year with COVID and what that impact has had in this area of work. What we're hoping to do, and I'll come to at the end of today's session, is to use this input for a further briefing, building on the briefing that Michael did last year, which will be published later on this year. And so we're going to ask people for contributions, and have asked people for contributions throughout the 8 webinars to help us with that, to provide examples of positive practice over this last year. So in terms of today, I'd like to welcome and introduce the speakers. We've got Carl Price from the Substance Misuse Recovery Coordinator at Change Grow Lives Homeless Team. We've got Jason, John, Kinga and Tom, who are members of Independent Futures. And then we'll have a short break, and after the break, Claire Bartram will be talking about emergency duty team services and support around this area of work. So I'll reiterate that the slides will be available as well as a recording on the LGA website in a couple of days. And please could you put any questions in the Q&A, because we'll come back to a Q&A discussion session towards the second half of this afternoon's programme. So hopefully that's clear. I would like to pass over to Carl, if you're our first speaker, if you would like to, I'll put myself on mute, if you would like to come off mute and introduce yourself and share your presentation. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Carl Price. I am a recovery coordinator in the homeless team at Change Grow Live in Birmingham. So my role at the moment is working with all the people who rough sleep, anybody that's in short stay, hostel accommodation, or people in unstable housing. I've been doing that now for about 5 years. A few years before that, I have actually experienced homelessness myself. I was rough sleeping on the streets of Birmingham for approximately about 4 years, sleeping in car parks, underground tunnels, shop doorways, anywhere that I could get my head down. Prior to that, I've lived in a lot of different hostel accommodation and also been in institutions such as children's homes and the care system since the age of 2. So I appreciate being asked to come and just share a little bit of my experience in both my kind of own experience of homelessness and also in kind of what I do day to day in my working practice. So this is just some of the feelings that I actually felt and some of the feelings that I experience in the people that I work with every day who are homeless on the streets. For me, it was quite a traumatic experience. I've seen quite a lot of bad stuff. The way I felt during that period, I felt alone. I felt scared. I was depressed. At points, I was suicidal. I couldn't see a way out of the situation that I was in because I felt that I was so entrenched in that lifestyle. I couldn't really see anything outside of that. I didn't feel like I had a voice. I didn't feel like people listened to me. A lot of the time I just felt like people would walk past me in the street and they would only see the fact that I had a sleeping bag and that I was homeless on the streets. They didn't see anything past that. They didn't really care about the reasons why I'd ended up in the position that I did, and I felt that people thought that I deserved to be in that position. The longer that I was on the streets, the more secluded that I felt and the more excluded from society that I felt as well, the further away and the more difficult that I found it to be able to transition back into that, you know, everyday kind of life that at points in my life I had lived. And it was confusing, you know. The people that I related to the best were people that were in similar circumstances to me. And if I'm honest, I was very, very wary of professionals, anybody that came out with, you know, a lanyard on or any form of ID or stuff like that, because part of me was institutionalized and I hadn't had good experiences over the years in the care system, in the kind of places that I'd lived and while I was homeless with professionals. I felt let down. I felt like people promised to do things that they were unable to do, or that they just weren't bothered. You know, I've seen a lot of bad stuff. My best friend that I was homeless with for those 4 years, I watched him have his throat slit purely because somebody took a disliking to him because he was homeless. He hadn't actually done anything wrong. The guy just disliked him. I was in an altercation with somebody as well that I woke up to in the middle of the night and they were trying to steal my trainers. I ended up getting stabbed 7 times by that person, you know, and these really were completely unprovoked attacks. I was in a position where I was very vulnerable. I didn't really feel I had support. You know, the people that were my best friends were also in that position and were also themselves very vulnerable. So, you know, that period of my life has had a lasting effect on me. It's a period of my life that I will never forget. And that's kind of the reason why now I do the role that I do, and I work with, you know, the homeless people and people in hostels and stuff like that. It's my opportunity to be able to give those people the support and, you know, give a little something back, for the help that people actually gave to me and eventually enabled me to come off the streets. So I think there's definitely, even now, I mean, homelessness has become a lot more kind of mainstream now, and there's been a lot more education, and it's talked about a lot more than what it used to be. I don't think it's as easy to ignore the issue now, but there are still a lot of different misconceptions about homeless people, and actually, you know, everyone that lives on the streets is dirty, or they deserve to be there, or they take drugs, or, you know, there's lots of different things, and I think it is about education. For me, you know, my journey started from a very early age, and that led me to the point, where I picked up substances, ended up on the streets. But there are many, many different reasons that somebody can become homeless, or, you know, end up in a hostel or unstable housing on somebody's sofa. These are just some of them. I think, you know, any one of those issues can be interlinked, and one can lead to another. Some people can deal with one of those or two. Some people may have all of them, or there may be other reasons why somebody becomes homeless. So now in my working practice, it's always about looking at what is the individual need of the person. I don't want to stereotype that person, because everybody's from a different background, everybody's got different needs, and support needs. And for me, it's always about finding out from that individual what's important to them. Because as a professional, sometimes you can be guilty of trying to fix somebody's situation and thinking you know what's best for them, when actually, if you have that conversation and you speak to them and you find out what's important to them, it may be that they have many different needs at the same time, but some may need addressing before others, and some may be important to that person. So again, it's just about breaking those stereotypes and understanding that really it doesn't matter your background, it doesn't matter how much money you've got, how big your house is, what job you do, where you're from. Everybody is in a position where at some point during their life they could become homeless, because, you know, everything you've built up can fall down and you can lose it all. So again, it's just about educating people. So when I was on the streets, the word safeguarding to me, I always had this kind of preconceived idea of what it was. And when I heard that word, to me, it meant people having their children taken off them, social services, people working against me rather than working with me. And I think, you know, across the board in our job roles, in our personal life, we all have a responsibility to recognise and respond to safeguarding. And I think in order to be able to do that effectively, we need people to actually understand what it is, the reasons why we're doing what we're doing. And like I said, a big deal for me is somebody working with me rather than feel like the safeguarding process is actually being done against me. So involving people in that process, it being a supportive process rather than feeling like actually they're penalising me. Um, so it's education, it's people understanding what it is, and why it's actually being done, how we're going to do it, who needs to do it, what are the different things that are going to need to be done, and in involving the person that's trying to be safeguarded. in the actual process itself. Training and education, I think, is a big thing again, making sure that people have the knowledge, they understand the protocol, the processes, the escalation routes, all of that different stuff as well. Learning from previous failures. So, you know, that there will be serious case reviews and safeguarding reviews and things where things have not been done to the standard that they should have been done, or there's been missed opportunities. And it's about being able to learn, where did it go wrong, you know, what should we have done, or what can we do better next time, and making sure that we don't repeat those same mistakes the next time something occurs. Sharing knowledge and experience, again, being able to, everybody's got their own knowledge and experience, different organisations, different people, and being able to bring that together to be able to get learning, because it doesn't matter how much we think we know, there's always more. We always need more knowledge, we always need more experience. Every kind of safeguarding situation that we're faced with or we go through, we learn something new from that. And it's about then taking that knowledge and that experience forward and being able to continuously improve our own practice and the way that we approach safeguarding with the homeless population. Also, it's about recognising the stuff that works really well, you know, positive outcomes from our practice as well, and being able to incorporate that in the future, and people understand that actually you've done really well, you know, you've done what was expected, it's had a good outcome, and next time let's do that again. Understanding what are the barriers as well, what things could prevent us from effective safeguarding practice as well. And again, it goes back to the training, the learning from previous failures, and also the sharing of knowledge and experience as well. I'm just trying to see, because I can't see on my thing what the last slide is. Let me just see if I can get it. Oh yeah, so action planning as well. So again, breaking it down into different steps and looking at what needs to be done and who's going to do it. And I think ultimately, you know, the word safeguarding for me when I was homeless, it was about somebody trying to keep me safe. The only thing was, at the time, I couldn't see that. I felt like they were trying to penalise me, but actually what they were trying to do ultimately was support me. And when I was ready to accept that support, stuff made a lot more sense to me, and that process then became a lot smoother and a lot easier for the professionals that were actually coming out on the streets every day and offering me that support and that advice and trying to get me out of that situation. So why is the multi-agency working approach, why is that important in the homeless sector? And the reason why I've put this car up is the reason why it's important. So when we're faced with somebody with complex needs, and myself, when I was homeless, you know, I had more than one thing that I needed support with, and all of them, you know, physical health, mental health, substance misuse, homelessness, all these different things, these complex needs that people will have. If we only address one of them, it's like a car. You've got four wheels on the car. If one of the wheels are missing, the car isn't going to go anywhere. You know, it's going to be at a standstill. There's not going to be any progress. And it tends to be the same with the complex needs. If somebody's got underlying mental health issues, but that isn't being addressed, but actually we're putting all our focus on addressing the substance misuse, well, then the likeliness is this person is self-medicating their mental health with substances. So if we don't sort out the mental health side of it, they're probably going to continue to use substances. The same again with the homelessness. if we try to put them into accommodation, but they're not receiving any support with their mental health, or they're not receiving support with their substance misuse, the chances are they're going to find it increasingly difficult to be able to maintain the accommodation because the other complex needs are not being addressed. So what I find every day in my own working practice, and when I was in the situation myself, is organisations working together in that multi-agency approach and everything being addressed together, you're in a much better position to be able to have a positive outcome, and for that person inevitably, if they get off the streets, to be able to maintain that progress going forward. So it's about everybody working together, moving in the same direction, everybody being on the same page, not duplicating work. So you've got two different organisations trying to complete the same task because there's been no communication between the two. So that's, for me, why multi-agency working is really, really important. And the benefits of it, again, it's knowledge and experience, because we're always going to need help from people who have their own expertise that fall outside of our own, job role. We can't be everything to everybody. So I need to be able to draw on that experience. I need to be able to phone up another organisation. I'm a substance misuse worker. I'm not a mental health worker. I'm not a GP. I'm not a probation officer. So I need to be able to tie in with those organisations and speak to those people and get, the benefit of their expertise and their help, because in the end, it achieves the best possible outcome for the person that I'm supporting. It also frees up time constraints that I have. So if I'm trying to fix things that are outside of my own job role, that's taking up time. That then means that I've got less time to sit down and talk to the person about their drug use or their alcohol use. So it also frees up my own time to be able to concentrate on the things that, I'm paid to do as well. Gives you opportunities for training and further education. So I go out now and I provide training on homelessness to loads of different organisations that work within the homeless sector, and by being able to do that, that is then, furthering other organisations' knowledge as well. It helps us to build those relationships, and again, all of this at the end of it is for the benefit of the person that we're actually supporting. It benefits their needs, as well. So, I like the saying, nothing changes if nothing changes. And I guess that goes for, myself when I was homeless. If I don't attempt to make any of these changes myself, then people can come out and offer me all the support in the world. If I'm not ready to do it, I'm probably not going to change much. And I know sometimes that's frustrating for people, and it's a continuous kind of cycle of offering support every day and kind of nothing changing. But ultimately, it boils down to whether or not that individual is ready to make those changes themselves. But I feel there are always things that we can do in our own working practice to adapt our approach, and look at new ways of working. COVID's been one where the way we work has completely changed. I think, not having face-to-face with people and being able to sit down and have proper interventions has been a big change, and things have probably gone unnoticed, and it probably has heightened, safeguarding concerns in a lot of different areas. There has been some positive as well, because I know myself that I've had quite a few clients that have been entrenched rough sleepers and have been doing it for 20 plus years, that maybe would still be doing it if it wasn't for some of the restrictions that came in, and actually now they're settled in accommodation for the first time in a long time, and they're in a much better position as well. So it has had some positive impact, as well as the negative. So being able to change and adapt our approach, we do, as support services, help thousands of homeless people each year. But like I've said, I always think that there's more that we can be doing, focusing on evidence-based practice, looking at actually what works and what doesn't, ensuring that we're making the most out of the opportunities that we have. So when we get that opportunity to have those interventions with people, at the end of that intervention, when that guy goes away, have we offered the support that we could have offered? Have we made the most of that intervention? Because sometimes they are few and far between. So when somebody walks out of an intervention with me, I want to make sure in my own mind that I'm happy that I've done everything possible during that time to counteract, any risk or any safeguarding concerns, and make sure that a person's going away feeling like they've been supported and they've been listened to, that they've had a voice. Policy reform that's got guided by the actual evidence. The issue of homelessness needs to be escalated up to the highest level of the government, and it needs to be consistently done, because in my kind of view, over time, sometimes it slips back again. So it becomes a really well-known issue. There's a lot of talk going on in government, funding comes available, but then sometimes that can also slip back and it can go back onto the back burner again. So it's about consistently being able to update that stuff, keep it at the forefront of people's minds, and deal with the issue. We've discussed about learning from previous failures, and also widening the multi-agency co-location approach as well. So I know in my team at CGL Birmingham that we go into the hostels and we run clinics. We have offices in the hostel. All the different workers go to all the different hostels across Birmingham each week, and we pick up a lot of people that we work with from actually doing that. It helps the hostels and it helps the people that live in them, because actually having workers there day to day, where they can just come and knock the office door, come in and have a chat, or come and get the support that they need, rather than having to travel a distance to be able to do that. I think that has really helped, and during COVID, it's really helped as well. And having a person-centered approach, so treating each person as an individual. When I was homeless, I didn't feel like people see me as a person. I felt like I lost my personality. I lost who I was. I became a number. I became a homeless person, and nobody seen past that. So for me, it's important to be able to look at that individual. They're still a human being. Yeah, they're in a bad situation, but like I said at the beginning, any of us can end up in that situation. So let's treat them as individuals. Let's look at their individual support needs, and let's get those addressed. And education and training, we've all talked about that, and I think absolutely everybody has their own role to play in the long run in ending homelessness. So just a few of other things as well. I mean, I received a lot of help to get off the streets. I would not have been able to do it on my own, and I'm eternally grateful to those people, and I will never forget that support and help that I was given to be able to get me out of that situation. And I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for those professionals and those organisations giving me their time and giving me their support. And these were some of the other things that people helped me to do, because if somebody would have took me off the streets and put me into four walls basically and left me to get on with it, I wouldn't have coped. I wouldn't have had no one, 4 years on the streets in the cold weather, and not having to pay bills, and not having to maintain a tenancy, and not having no benefits, and all that different stuff that come with me being homeless. I wouldn't have been able to function in a property. So I needed wraparound support to be able for me to maintain that tenancy, and to learn that behaviour, and to learn how to pay bills and get my gas and electric and all that different stuff that came with it. I needed help to get back into employment, for education, for training. Obviously, a big part of my homelessness was substance misuse as well. And I actually went through Change Grow Live as a service user initially, and then obviously was given the opportunity to volunteer and get into paid employment. I needed suitable accommodation. So I was a vulnerable adult. I didn't want to be placed into a hostel where everybody was using drugs. You know, people are being taken advantage of. I needed to be placed into accommodation that was suitable for my needs, where I felt safe. And I was one of the lucky people that, you know, at the time was given my own flat, and that really helped me. I needed help with mental health because I had a lot of, you know, ACEs. I had a lot of trauma from childhood and different stuff that I needed to deal with, because if that left untreated, I would have struggled. I needed help setting up a benefit claim. I didn't have no benefits. I didn't have no housing benefit. I didn't really know how to do it because I hadn't done it for so many years. I wasn't registered with a GP. I had underlying physical health issues that needed sorting out, you know, because being homeless and using drugs brought me to the brink of death, you know, if I'm honest. Offending, I was on all kinds of probation orders at the time. I needed help to get to those appointments and to link in with probation. The living skills, maintaining the tenancy, finances, paying my rent, all of the different stuff that comes with it. I had no understanding of that. I didn't have a bank account. You know, I had nowhere to have my benefits paid into. I had no money. I needed help to set that up. I had no furniture, and I had no support network. So the biggest thing is, if you've got no one to talk to and you've got no support, you know, sometimes, you know, in your professional life, you're available from, in my case, 8 till 4 o'clock on the afternoon, and then what do you do for the rest of the day and night? You know, you're sitting somewhere in a sleeping bag, or you're sitting in an empty flat and you've got no one to talk to, and you're struggling with all these different things. You know, so they helped me to link back in. You know, I met my mum after 30 years. I got talking to my dad again. You know, I had a relationship with people that I cared about and I loved, and I hadn't been part of my life for so long. And that stuff just gave me another incentive to continue making that progress and moving forward. So I think overall, you know, it's a very complex issue and it will continuously need to be looked at and addressed. But when we're doing the right things and the right supports in place for people, you know, it empowers them to start making these better decisions for themselves moving forward. We keep them safe, you know, we keep them from harm. And at the end of the day, there are positive outcomes, and I'm an example of that, with support that I've received from people. So I hope I've covered everything. Thank you for everybody's time, and I think that's me done.
Thank you so much, Carl. That was really powerful and insightful presentation, and a lot to think about and to reflect on. People, just going to remind people to put questions in the Q&A, to come back to any of the speakers after all the speakers have done their presentations. I'm going to hand over to Jason, John, Kinga and Tom as members of Independent Futures to talk through their presentation, and then we'll have a short break. So please, I'm handing over to you to start.
Hi, I'm John, a consultant from Independent Futures. I'd like to introduce some testimony from some of our life experiences. Independent Futures IF is a group of professional lived experience of multiple disadvantage. IF members aim to empower clients and professionals in Bristol to make long-term positive changes by sharing the learning from their own lived experiences. What works and what does not for homelessness from lived experience perspective.
Okay, would you like me to present my, John, I'll give my presentation now, shall I?
Yeah, I'd like to hand over to Tom.
Okay, no worries. Okay, here it is, coming up. Bear with me. There we go. Okay, the pathway to progress and what this means about improvements that can be made to housing and housing process of the homeless clients, largely, ironically, due to what we've been going through with COVID-19 epidemic. So I'll just read through this for you and we can ask questions later. Those members of IF, as ourselves, Independent Futures, involved with homelessness matters, have noticed a significantly increased rate or speed at which local authorities have moved to house homeless clients during the COVID-19 epidemic. Indeed, Ross sleepers, who might not previously have been taken into account by the authorities, have in many cases had their immediate accommodation requirements actually addressed. Peer research carried out by IF members at hotels used for immediate housing needs discovered a consensus amongst Ross sleepers. For it was concluded that emergency accommodation provided to many of the clients was actually of a far better quality than had originally been anticipated by those same service users. So, you know, exceeding requirements or expectations is not a common thing in this area, I'd have thought. In addition, the key worker support that has been provided by Golden Key practitioners at the various sites to all clients in those settings was found to be largely beneficial on feedback from those same service users, with one or two minor exceptions. What was also appreciated was that clients maintained a reasonably high degree of personal freedoms when residing at these COVID-19 hotels. Hotels, not hostels, remember, while simultaneously keeping to the social distancing guidelines put forward by the government and the relevant authorities. Free food and other beverages were also provided for clients on those premises, and this benevolence was largely welcomed by these same service users. Okay, the odd complaint about the quality of the food, but otherwise, under the circumstances, it was indeed appreciated. As we look to the future, during the course of the lockdown restrictions, there has been a clear examination and support for the needs that homeless clients face in regards to gaining permanent housing in the post-COVID-19 epidemic era, rather than simply during the pandemic itself, not simply for a crisis situation, in other words. The success of the final outcome is yet to be quantified. It may take a number of years to fully compile as clients adjust to their new and, we hope, ideally permanent respective residential surroundings. And this is a lot harder than I think people imagine, as our previous speaker, Carl, made clear. What lived experience can offer, well, those of us who've gone through the similar circumstances or circumstances associated with homelessness, IF have provided lived experience input into a number of ongoing housing programs in Bristol. One of these projects is still in the planning process, but it's expected to be completed by mid-2022. While another program has been admitting clients since last autumn, with predominantly positive feedback from both the residents and in those new apartments and their neighbours who don't have an historical background of being homeless. So a mixing of different groups there, an unusual start. Project developers have been actively trying to get clients and lived experience input as to how the necessary housing can be constructed. For example, one such housing development is having ongoing regular interactions with IF members at meetings, and therefore where representatives from other professions within the housing industry are present and can ultimately exchange and engage with ourselves at IF and the input that we provide. So different sectors coming together to formulate a cocktail of policies, which hopefully, as with multi-agency working, produces a positive result for all. But we must also manage expectations, and advice is also given by IF to the relevant authorities as to how clients' expectations of their forthcoming accommodation might be successfully met. This has included IF setting out how to best address service users' potential disappointments in the event that there are outstanding concerns originating from clients in relation to their new residence. And even this has happened at the hotels, which otherwise has been a largely positive feedback from service users. Ultimately, we must look at the bigger picture, for this is for the long term, and it's trying to avoid homeless ghettos. This can be seen in the development of such an accommodation project. I related to it briefly earlier, currently taking place in Bristol, with a mixing of homeless clients and non-registered homeless residents within the same relevant building. If successful, such a makeup of residents from a comparatively wide criteria could indeed be the blueprint for future social and non-social housing, thus moving away from a form of social segregation that might otherwise exist and creating ghettos that, well, we could say like hostels in the community, but on another scale. It's moving away from that and having more genuine neighborhoods. An ideal that can bring about, I think it's genuine social cohesion. It's not just going to be perfect, but it's definitely an improvement. Okay, now I will pass you over to Kinga, who can talk about the Housing First project. Kinga, over to you.
Hello, I'm Kinga, a member of IF in Bristol. I want to talk about Housing First project. This is my first presentation. So Housing First is an intervention which supports homeless people with multiply and complex needs to access and maintain independent housing. It is different to traditional staircase or treatment first approach in that it places people directly in independent long-term settled housing with personalized, flexible and non-time limited support. Service users have choice and control over both their housing and the support they receive. What does work with this Housing First project? So several clients has responded very well to the approach and have been successfully housed and are maintaining their tenancies for prolonged period of time. This may be the case even after years of sleeping rough. When this happens, clients appear to have more control over the problems and rely less on emergency services such as police or A&E. The biggest challenges is housing supply, challenges also in working with some housing officers who are commonly described as lacking knowledge and understanding of Housing First, challenge of overcoming people's fears and anxiety around tenancy failure and dealing with social isolation when moving from the streets into secured accommodation. One of the biggest challenges is cuckooing, or it's frequent with drug using clients. The practice of cuckooing is not always evident to the client. Drug dealers may present themselves as friends initially, throwing house parties and supplying drugs in clients' homes. They take over the place indebting the tenant and potentially forcing them to work for them. Other types of antisocial behavior or exploitation from neighbors may take place. Health and safety measures could be compromised by clients who might disable smoke alarms or storing highly flammable substances like butane. And poor mental health made it challenging to obtain consent from candidates. And in some cases, tenancies were terminated as the risk was unmanageable. Another important challenge is to identify suitable staff and particularly support workers with the necessary combination of skills, experience, and attitudes. So it's important to involvement of people with lived experience of homelessness and complex needs in service development and preparation. Project is fantastic opportunity to allow rough sleepers live independently. It's cost effective, save money on hostels and emergency services. So in Bristol is 7 clients so far, and in Camden, as I found out, is 50 clients. Thank you for listening. I'm gonna pass it on to Jason.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I'm Jason. I've been a member of Independent Futures for 6.5 years. Yeah, Corrado, could you just play the presentation for me, please?
I've been homeless twice in my life, once for a few months back in 1994 and again for almost 2 years with my partner in 2006. The experiences were totally different, but I remember my biggest shock and disappointment was when I needed help the second time round, The hub had gone. Can't remember its official name, but everyone always called it the hub. It was a small, ramshackle office on the edge of St Paul's. It was tiny and had a disorganised feel to it. There was a cramped reception area, and you could turn up at any time. No appointments, no queues, and no tickets. I had a worker, an older black lady called Joyce. I saw her face to face whenever I came. She knew me and my case. Although the hub was not a day centre or food provider, they didn't seem to mind if you came just to get out of the cold and grab a hot drink, as long as you asked for an update on your application. In 2006, I was confronted with telephone numbers, no credit, and sometimes no phone. A big housing office with unfriendly bouncers outside, long waits, automated tickets, and I never met the same person twice. No one knew me, and my life was held as notes on a computer and not on a person's head and heart. Part of me believes I was homeless for so much longer due to this. In fact, it took 7 years from the date of our housing application and a premature baby to get housed by the council. We did, however, get off the streets quicker than this, but this was sheer luck and thanks to a pushy partner and over a year of searching for a landlord who would take housing benefit. There were more homelessness services to meet our immediate needs, a wealth of free food options, a choice of day centres, and the night shelter. As a woman, though, I don't think I would have felt safe accessing some of these if I'd been on my own. However, the staff I met were like the people from the hub, friendly and supportive. The thing is, they had no power at all to get us off the streets like my old worker had. Fast forward to 2021, and we've been in secure accommodation for 12 years and off the streets for 14. I still have regular contact with homelessness services, but this time as a drug and alcohol worker. I am now one of those friendly faces. In my role, I often refer to food banks and help make housing-related telephone calls. The thing is that I, just like the staff at the night shelter and free food places, have no power to get anyone off the streets. Those that do have the power are hidden away at the end of the phone and reside in a big central building, hard for my South Bristol clients to get to. There are still bouncers, renamed customer service agents. My guys, if they manage the hour walk or can afford the bus fare, get to see whoever is available that day. If they have an allocated worker, they don't know about it. Housing workers are for those that are already housed. They, like I used to, exist to the council's homelessness team as notes on a computer system. My clients can't push or chase their cases due to the office being so far away, and a telephone call involves at least an hour on hold waiting to talk to a stranger who does not know them. Anyway, often they have no phone or no credit. Even I, as a fellow professional, cannot bypass this telephone waiting system for them, and this makes it hard for me to support them with their housing and their appointments, no matter how much I want to. Today, there are more food banks and soup kitchens, but day centres are long gone, and the quality of food provided has dropped. Sofa surfers have almost next to no chance of getting housed, and night shelters and hostels seem more frightening than the streets. I believe it's the loss of places like the hub, the one-stop, disorganised, paper-filled office that had allocated and contactable workers, where service users had a name, that has changed the feel and effectiveness of homelessness services.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. 'Cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. I go to the movie and I go downtown. Somebody keep telling me don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Then I go to my brother and I say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Lord, there've been times that I thought I could last for long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. I was born by
Did you
the
stop the music, Corrado?
in a little tent.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jason. I had a prepared statement, and then I'm not even going to bother to read it. I kind of think that complex needs, multiple disadvantages, they're not nice sounding words, but they almost make it seem as though a problem cannot be solved. Over the COVID period, we've done amazing things. I'd like to just congratulate the team that did this presentation. We are all lived experience, and to have our voice, you know, I don't feel like an imposter here speaking our truth. It's required. There's a lot of mechanical thinking, a lot of planning. It's been going on for decades. It's not even a new thing. My passion's EDI. I just believe that we need to get in contact with the empathetic part that led us into these roles that we have as professionals, as lived experience. And there is a relationship there that has a power that can help deliver better outcomes for the clients. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
just to say-
colleagues.
Yeah, just to say that we look forward to answering your questions, and thank you for listening.
So thank you very much for that
No problem.
really complex and nuanced presentation. And I think it captured a lot of the issues that, Jason, you just referred to in your closing comments about people's experience and the variety of people's experiences, the good and the bad and the ugly. We're about to have a 10-minute break. people don't go away, just go off and have a cup of tea or comfort break. Come back for the third presentation, and I think I've seen quite a few questions coming through the Q&A. Keep them coming. There's an opportunity later on to have a conversation with colleagues, even if it's not a question, it might be a comment. I'm trusting Michael to pull that together. So it's 5 to 3 now. Shall I suggest we come back at 3:05? So let's have a 10-minute break and come back at 3:05 for the next part of this afternoon. But please don't go away too far. Thank you, everybody, and thanks so much for the presentations for the first half of this session. See you soon. Welcome back, everybody. So I'm going to hand over to you, Claire, to talk about safeguarding homeless adults out of hours, and then after that we'll come back together for the questions and discussion. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Adi, and thank you everybody for taking part and inviting me to be part of this. I have to say, having to follow that is a tough one. So what I'm hoping to do is to give people an idea about how to make best use of the social workers who are available outside of normal working hours, the emergency duty teams. Now, I work as an emergency duty team manager. I'm a social worker in an AMP in central London. There will be teams of people like the team that I manage all around the country, but they will be slightly different depending on the situation of your local council. So first of all, who are we and where are we? Councils are expected to provide access to emergency social work support outside of normal working hours. The majority of what we do is dealing with child protection, adult safeguarding, thinking about and requests for Mental Health Act assessments that come up. But those aren't the only emergencies. Emergencies come in all sorts of ways. And one of the things I've always enjoyed about the work that we do is the fact that I'm talking to real people with real problems and trying to help them navigate into the system and finding ways that will work for them. Now, one of the challenges about the services is that they can be very different depending on where you are. So some areas have a model where they have different people who are focusing around helping adults and people with mental health problems, with a different team working with children, while others will provide what's called a generic service, which basically means you have sometimes one, sometimes more than one practitioner taking all of the inquiries that come in out of hours, regardless of specialism. And the team that I manage, that's the way that we are set up, is that whatever the problem, the social work problem or dilemma that comes in, it will come to one of my workers and we will try to work our way around it and think about what it is that we can do to help. You will find the contact details for your out-of-hours social work team often on local council websites or via calling their out-of-hours numbers, and they will actually often tell you out of hours what to do and who to go through to. Now, in terms of our role, the clue is in the title. Emergency duty teams are there to deal with emergency situations that arise outside of normal working hours. And actually, a lot of what is done by people is around working with people themselves, working with organisations, but intervening where necessary to make a situation safe enough until the next working day. It's the difference between urgent and emergency. And sometimes I think that is one of the things that causes people stress and concern, that they reach out and they don't get a response that they are hoping for. And I think that's why I try to emphasize this thing in terms of, well, this is the role. The role is to focus on the emergencies. In terms of the staffing that is likely to be available, certainly if you're in a small borough like Islington or a small council, there may be only one person on out of hours who deals with all of the emergencies coming in: mental health, child protection, adult safeguarding, and anything in between. So, and calling ourselves a team sometimes gives the impression that there's lots of different people around, whereas actually there may only be one person. However, the value of that is that one person is likely to be an experienced social worker who is very used to dealing with crises and dealing with lots of different bits of information to try to help people find their way through the system. So in terms of getting the best out of a contact with EDT, the first thing is actually about information. You'll be amazed the number of contacts that we have where somebody forgets to tell us the name of the person or forgets to give us some basic information. So if you can do that, because the chances are that you will be ringing through to some sort of call centre who will take the details and pass it on to the duty social worker, that will help us. It's also helpful to know what the emergency is, why this is a situation that cannot wait until the next day, or whether there is information that you want to alert the day services to that has just come up. And also be prepared to wait for a callback, because KIC teams can be busy and they will triage and they will deal with the most urgent things first. Now, I thought I'd actually try to think about some case examples, situations where I know my own team or myself as a social worker has had to deal with safeguarding issues. Now, one of the things to understand is that because of the way we work, come on at 5 o'clock in the evening, work overnight, and then maybe that person won't be around again for another week, the chances are that the social workers are not going to be starting a full investigation, but what they are doing is taking those initial referrals, looking at all the information and trying to deal with the initial problems, but also trying to make sure that the information gets back into the right part of the system so that people get the help they need during the day. So the sorts of things that I've dealt with are help where we've got a phone call from a member of the public who's actually worried about somebody that they've met who's homeless on the street, and helping them get in touch with our local provider of emergency outreach housing so that they could actually get that person into an appropriate service, but also then feeding back to the day services, telling them why it's important to get involved and what my concerns are about that situation. Thinking about a young woman with mental health problems who appeared to be living rough. Although we as a team don't case hold, what we found ourselves doing, because we were so worried about this particular young woman, is we actually followed her up over 2 or 3 weeks, exchanging information within the team to try to make sure she didn't get lost, and that ultimately she was picked up and supported with her mental health. And then that enabled her to get more help in terms of her housing situation. And finally, thinking about an older gentleman in his 80s who'd come to this country thinking he could live with one of his sons and was subsequently abandoned by that son at the benefits office. And I got a call about 6 in the evening by a police officer saying, I don't know what to do with this man. He doesn't know where his son is. He has no contact details. We went and gone to the flat, so there's nobody there. And for that man, because of his care needs, I was able to accommodate him overnight until the day services could come, do an assessment, and actually take that case forward. So in terms of actually thinking about how to understand emergency duty teams and getting the best out of us, it's good to know that we're there. We're experienced professionals, social workers. We're used to balancing risk. We're used to dealing with a number of cases. And we're used to thinking about how to keep people safe in the short term. There may be an occasion where actually what you need to do or want to do is call and talk to somebody to see what's possible and to balance up, think about what to do next. we can be a useful source of support and advice. Sadly, we still haven't found that magic wand that provides accommodation, but we know that, and we'll help you think about what is available and what can be done now as opposed to what needs to happen later. And that actually brings us into the final issue, which is actually there can be situations where the emergency duty team social workers are a good way of getting information into the right part of the system, because we have access quite often to a number of different databases. And sometimes there's been situations where I can see information about somebody from on the children's database and on the adult database and on the mental health database. And by bringing together those different bits of information, I can actually make sure that somebody who needs intervention, who needs safeguarding, gets what they need, even if it's not during the time when I'm on duty. I can give the information to the right people in the right way so that they do what is needed. Now, that was a very brief introduction to my job in EDT.
Thanks, Claire. Thank you. Really helpful. And as a kind of cog in the system around information sharing and trying to achieve the right outcomes for people. Michael, I'm going to ask you to come off mute and share some of the questions and direct them. I think it would be fair to say that there's been an overwhelmingly positive response to the contributions in the first half of the session today. I think people have been really moved and inspired by the voices of the colleagues with lived experience who've presented, and I'm really grateful to everybody this afternoon for having contributed. But I'm going to hand over to you because there were some quite specific issues and questions that came up as well. And colleagues on the webinar, do continue to put questions in the Q&A, and we'll try and cover as much as we can in the time we've got left this afternoon. So Michael, I'm handing over to you to try and direct the questions and comments.
Thank you, Adi. I'd endorse your opening remarks about the feedback from the first presentations. So Carl, Thomas, Kinga, John, Jason, Corrado, the kind of words that have been used are brilliant, inspiring, fantastic, outstanding, powerful, inspirational, and lots of respect coming through the Q&A for your contributions and the way that you've captured from your lived experience of homelessness, and indeed your lived experience of working also in the sector subsequently, the way that you've captured crucial messages that we all need to hear. Jason, I really liked your comment about not being an imposter. I think you and I have previously shared experiences about each of us having the imposter syndrome from time to time, and clearly what you said resonated, and a number of people were really grateful that you spoke from your heart as opposed to reading from a script. Yeah, really powerful. There are some questions, and I think what I'll do is I'll say what the question or the observation was, and then come initially, Carl, to you, and then I'll move across to those of you from Independent Futures in Bristol. So the first question really is, how did your support start? What in a sense enabled you to begin to make the changes that led to the changes, to use Carl's phrase? So how did the support start? What worked for you? So Carl, insofar as you feel able to say, and willing to say, how did your support start, and what helped you to sustain the journey once you'd begun?
Yes, thanks, Michael. I think my first kind of thing that really sticks in my mind, where my kind of journey really started to change, was the day that I walked in to Change, Grow, Live, and I had an intervention with somebody else that had lived experience. So they were a peer mentor, and I can remember that day that I'd woke up that morning and I felt suicidal. And I had an appointment and I went in to Change, Grow, Live in Birmingham, and this guy come up to me in the reception area and he just started talking to me normally. He offered me a cup of coffee, and what he did is he asked me how I was feeling. He asked me what did I need. He didn't try and force any support onto me, but what he did is he made me feel like he actually cared. And he made me feel human. That was the other thing, you know, I didn't feel ignored. I felt like I had a voice. And that day when I left Change, Grow, Live, and I was walking down the road, I remember thinking that something in me had changed, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but I just felt like that guy understood where I was coming from, and he didn't treat me differently, and he didn't judge me, and I had that little tiny bit of hope inside me. So that was really the starting point for me, and then it progressed on to, you know, I felt more at ease to attend appointments and open up slightly more about what my needs and kind of what I wanted to do and what the issues were I was facing, and that was really the start of it. And I think just the continued support, and feeling like people were actually starting to listen to what I was saying over time enabled me to start making the changes myself, because really that's what I needed to do. So support workers support me to make those changes. They don't do them for me, because when I was homeless, I felt like I didn't have a voice. I didn't have no power. So they empowered me to make better decisions. And once I started to do that, that became my focus. And then I noticed that my life started to change for the better. The more that happened, the more I enjoyed living like that. And the further away the bad side of my life started to feel. And now I am where I am, and I'm much happier. And I've got everything really in my life that I've ever wanted and never imagined I would have when I was in that position.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Carl. Somebody's put in the chat that what you've described is the essence of making safeguarding personal. So thank you for that. John, Jason, Corrado, Thomas, Kinga, anything any of you want to contribute about what helped you to begin the journey out of homelessness? I get a sense the hub was quite important from the presentation, but maybe if any of you feel able to say what helped.
Well, for me, although I personally wasn't actually homeless, being involved in the homeless sector through chance, through this peer research project we did, interviewing clients, was an eye-opener. And I've done more work in homelessness now in this last year, or a bit whatever, than I hardly ever did before. I did a bit of time at St Mungo's as a social worker, but not much, or just prior to training. So just this whole thing has opened up my eyes, and seeing how that old cliche, necessity is a mother of invention, is so true. Because with the COVID-19 crisis, we have been able to address a lot of these issues head on in a way that I think even Carl was homeless could not possibly have imagined. It is possible. It just requires that bit of urgency, emergency, and appreciation. It is like a war effort. We've just got to make sure we sustain this. Easier said than done. But I think, yeah, we're not going to satisfy everyone, all the clients, or Not all the clients will be happy. And yes, there will be a handful that will remain on the street for whatever reason. I won't go into the specifics. But ultimately, we can make a significant difference housing people where there is clearly space, and also letting the public know about this and educating the public, as I've been educated over the last 12 months in this matter. It is not just a binary thing. It's much more complex. People will be surprisingly understanding.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. John, or Jason or Kinga, or anything you want to add about what helped you to begin to make the journey?
For me, it was just, sorry, Jay.
No, go on, John.
No, just quick, I was just going to say for myself, back in the day, it was having somebody that actually paid attention and listened, because I've been to an organization before to do with housing and had a problem, which was not just really not being heard. And then when I did try to voice myself, it took me the wrong way because of not understanding or lack of understanding, and with my frustration. Anyway, to cut long story short, I also used the hub to help me to progress in terms of showing empathy, listening. And actually, when I did actually speak with them, they made me feel like they actually did care. You know, it wasn't just a exercise. They showed me that they did care. So they helped me to feel supported and move on. And I did, from that, I did progress and get housed and so forth. So I'm still there now. So yes.
Okay, thank you, John. Jason, did you want to add something? You're on mute, my friend.
Hi. The homeless part of my journey is not the beginning of the journey, to be honest. And we speak about multiple disadvantage, and we speak about complex needs. And like Carl said in his testimony, the journey started from childhood trauma, and then that leads to decisions, that leads to institutions, that eventually led me to being homeless in Bristol. The thing that got me out of it, as much as there were great people, was I was resilient. You know, as much as I've been at the lowest, there was always something within myself that was still resilient enough to keep going. And it's easy to paint a big picture about, you know, lived experience, and we bring depth and emotion, and we do. But that recognition needs to turn into an action, which needs to turn into money, which needs to turn into planning, which needs to, you know, as much as I'm a lived experience and I describe myself, I don't describe myself as anything else. Anything else comes after the lived experience. So I say lived experience. I'm a trustee. I'm a co-chair of the national approach on mental health framework. So it's about realizing that some of these people that you as professionals, and I'm assuming most of the people watching this are professionals, as much as you can make decisions to help people with really great intentions, if you do not have that depth on every level, it's harder to get the message. It's harder to break the stigmas. It's harder to challenge unconscious bias. It's harder to challenge the fact that when most professionals leave work, they don't live in the places where they're trying to solve the problems for. I'm not saying everybody's got to move to those places, but we need education. We need understanding. Assalamu alaikum. There's so many little hellos, highs, and that lived experience have to do through resilience to kind of fit into the system. It's about time the system kind of fitted around the people, wrap around the people and hold them, and place a value on that in your plans. You can't just call for lived experience just to create an emotional reaction. It has to have a monetary value that shows people that as much as you can get things wrong and bad things happen to you, you can be a success, just like Carl is. What an inspiration. And that is what I would like to move this on, because we've been talking about this decades. This ain't a new issue. It really isn't.
True.
And that's what I want to say.
Okay. No, that's brilliant. And actually it leads into two other questions or observations that I picked up. One was, how do professionals, how do practitioners, how do services, how might they better use the expertise and the experience that you bring? And then the second question was around, how should services better measure outcomes? Commissioners who fund services expect outcomes. What kind of outcomes should we be measuring or capturing, if not measuring? So how can we better use the expertise that you bring by virtue of your experiences, and what outcomes matter that we should be capturing? Carl, if I go back to you first, any thoughts on either of those?
Well, yeah, they're quite difficult questions and quite, broad questions. I think, over the years that I've worked in this sector, that I think lived experience has become more of an important thing, and obviously a lot of what Michael just spoke about using it to the best of its ability, really, all the way up the chain, not just kind of your outreach workers or whatever it is, but going all the way up within the organisation. I think it is used quite well. I know Change Grow Live, where I work, that lived experience is a big part of what we do day to day. I think sometimes as well, though, that people that haven't got lived experience come from a different point of view, which for some people also works, because I've worked with people that actually don't want to work with somebody that's got lived experience, for whatever their reasoning behind that is, and they would prefer not to do that. I think things like what we're doing today, I think, are absolutely brilliant, and I think the more of these things, the more aware we can make people, and the more people that have been through it are able to talk about it and get it out there. I think it's always a positive thing, and I think we really need to look at the positive outcomes we have and actually use them, and make sure that they're made available and they're recorded, and they're sent to the government, they're recorded in statistics and figures, and why it's worked, and what things have been done. Again, if people are not aware of what's happening, then they don't know. So we continuously need to keep making improvements to the way these things are looked at, and new ways of working, and what the things that are working well, we need to do more of. We need to move more towards that. For some people that I work with, the fact when they know that you've been through it, they're a lot more receptive to you as well. Some people are like that as well. They will say, you probably know where I'm coming from, and I will say, I don't know exactly where you're coming from, because you're an individual and I'm an individual, and we've probably had different experiences, but there's common experiences as well, and that's being homeless, and the way probably that being homeless makes you feel as well. But I'm not the same as somebody else, so they're going to have slightly different feelings and experiences of their time being homeless. So yeah, it's a lot of what Michael just said, you know, using it to the best advantage that we can, incorporating it all levels, recording the good outcomes and making sure that the people that, you know, give the money and give the funding and, you know, do the policy reform and make these, you know, decisions in government are aware of the things that are going good, and those decisions can be guided on that evidence rather than kind of blindly.
Okay, thank you, Carl. John, Jason, Kinga, Thomas. I mean, clearly you've been working in Independent Futures. You're working together. What lessons should we take from that?
Well, I was just going back to Michael, Professor Preston. Shoot.
No, Michael, please.
Michael,
drop the professor.
About outcomes, and I think it depends on sometimes the funding that's put forward. If budgets are slightly bigger, we can look at qualitative surveys, finding the details of what clients did like or didn't like. Qualitative research and surveys. Quantitative, more briefer questions, but nevertheless surveys still have their uses as well. And I think it's getting client feedback, perhaps feedback from the public, and evidence-based practice of how certain things have got better over a certain period than they were before. This was like this back in 2010, but by 2014, because we did this, that, and the other, it became that, and that is better than this because of this, that, and the other. I know it sounds very basic, but I think evidence-based practice, feedback from primary sources, and ideally it'd be good feedback as to how you got value for money. I think it is, depending on the detail.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just add to that? Because we talk about data, we talk about evidence, we talk about collating information from so many different sources. And I know of some, and I'm not going to get on my own bandwagon here, but there's evidence that prove a lot of things, but yet we're still not that far forward. So there are fundamentals here. We're missing a trick here, because we're talking as though we're talking about a set of this newly discovered race of people that are not connected to us. Do you know the testimonies that we did with the Sam Cooke? And I'm happy to share that. Some of that, the reason why I got emotional, because my queen shared that first bit. And you know why? With her own voice. You know why? Because I wanted the audience, which I will make an assumption are predominantly white and privileged, to hear her voice, because she comes from white and privileged. That's my queen. We have a son. It's not about data. This is not about building ships. It's about human beings and us realizing whether you're helping, whether you're supporting, whether you're intellectually working out how to solve this problem, that we are all humans, and we need to understand each other. We need to stop holding on to power and kind of recognize it's not about that. This is about emotions. This is about breathing, feeling things. We've got data that backs up so much, but yet we don't do anything about it. So why is any more data? There should be fundamentals that we know, and then we just keep building on those fundamentals. One of them has to be EDI. One of them has to be involving the people you're trying to help. And the nearest you can get to someone in crisis or someone that has experienced that is someone that has got through it. So maybe someone of lived experience. They have to be involved, steering, operational. Let's just done with the lip service. Data, it's emotions we're talking about here, and we need to understand that we are all related. We really are. I mean, I don't know, data sometimes gets it all.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing you saying, and it's echoed in some of the observations in the Q&A, Jason, is that actually we know what good looks like here. We don't need to find out what best practice looks like. We actually know about it already. I mean, for example, there are comments in the Q&A about dual diagnosis, people who have substance misuse issues and mental health issues, and people saying, why don't we have dual diagnosis workers? Why do we still have the vicious circle of it's not a mental health issue, it's a substance misuse issue, it's not a substance misuse issue, it's a mental health. Why are we still going round in this circle? We actually know what we need to be doing. We're just not doing it, except that COVID has actually shown, and you talked about it in the presentation from Independent Futures. COVID has actually shown what is possible when we actually draw on the evidence. So yeah, people really responding to that message. Adi, I hope you're also looking at the Q&A box, because I can't keep up with yeah, you got your thumbs up. That's good. That's good. There was something in the Q&A that I noticed too about the words we use, and I think, Carl, was it you in your presentation, or maybe it was in both presentations, that we actually need to, in a sense, translate the professional jargon we use. So again, if I start with Carl and then come to Independent Futures, Carl, any thoughts about the words we use?
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of it myself now in a professional capacity, because you pick up a lot of these different words, and then they kind of become the normal. But again, the way that you speak to somebody, if they're not understanding what you're saying, say for the instance, the word of, safeguarding. My kind of view of that was always a negative one. So the minute a professional actually mentioned that word to me, I shut off from that. So I suppose, Michael touched on it in his thing as well, where we talk about complex needs and all of these different words. So, but I guess it's going back to a lot of what we're talking about is people. And their experience, and there's things around substance misuse. Do you call it misuse? How you actually word stuff when you have interventions with people, I think, can make a massive difference to what their kind of reaction back to you is. Because my experience when I was on the streets is I was so guarded already of professionals, so when they used big words I didn't understand, all those conversations became very kind of boxed off in the kind of professional language. I shut off from them. I immediately, my barriers were up. I didn't want to tell them too much information because I was scared what they were going to do with that information, and really, as a person, then I was selling myself short in those interventions based upon what was being said to me, rather than actually the stuff that I needed to say and the stuff that I needed to unload. So I suppose that, again, with a lot of what we do, there's always room to look at what can we do differently. Are things going to work better if we don't use negative language and we try to focus more on the positive stuff? Because that's what I want to do as a worker. I want people to come out of the support session or coming out of the service and feeling more positive than what they did when they walked in through the door. I don't want them to walk out feeling worse. And one of those things is going to be what you say to them. What I do is I say, I've got an hour and a half. What do you want to talk about? It's your hour and a half. I'm not going to sit here and refer you to death or tick boxes. You need to talk. You talk. It's your session, and let them speak, and that tends to work pretty well, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks, Carl. John, Jason, Kinga, any Thomas?
Yeah.
Also,
and I think a lot depends on the therapeutic relationship between the client and the service user. Sorry, between the client and the practitioner. Again, client service user. Depends which one you
Yeah,
favour.
Even the use of the word client is loaded.
There you go, patient,
Yeah.
what have you. I mean,
Yeah.
depends on, it's subjective. People have different views. It's a therapeutic input, and but that from the beginning, and building that trust. It may include a bit of jargon, it may not, but it's that the therapeutic relationship between clients and practitioner includes so many different things. Jargon is one little bit of it. There'll be other factors about building that trust and understanding. And I don't think there's an absolute textbook for that because it will vary from individual to individual. I think overall it's about that building of trust. And over time, there may be a bit more jargon, maybe a bit less. But so long as both sides understand where the other is coming from and can see results coming, then I think, it's understanding of communication. And then the therapeutic relationship can move on from there.
I wondered, John, Jason or Kinga, whether you had any thoughts about language. For example, would you class yourself as experts by experience? Is that a phrase that resonates for you?
I think sometimes jargon and different ways it changes so regular that it creates another, this is my personal perspective, I just thought of it, a protective shield that from a lived experience perspective is another barrier, but from a professional perspective, it's another protective barrier. I don't totally get the answer to it. I really don't. But I get the need for it as well. So I'm not just going, no, everybody's got to change their language. But we find it hard to speak to people that are in our communities that come from another faith. To say good morning or goodbye, just those two little words. So how the system navigates this problem without making it even more complicated, because that's what normally happens, and it just seems to get even more muddied. I don't know, but I think the answers are relatively simple. And relationships, I just don't understand why the association to our normal lives and the relationships we have with the people that we have about us on a daily basis, socialize with, go on holiday and meet by accident, why those skills are not, they're almost separate. You become a professional and then it's a different type of relationship. And I just think we lose the human part of it all. And that's why we lose people's understanding of what professionals do. And we don't promote our good work. Professionals, I don't think, promote enough what they do. And that's where lived experience comes in, because every time I learn something, I pass that on to people who don't understand the system, who don't understand the processes or the times and the different stages that have to be gone through for the client to receive the support that they need. We need clarity, we need honesty, we don't need more obscuring, different words and still not, people still not getting clarity or not understanding. And then that can't challenge stigma, can it?
No.
I think there needs to be varying power dynamics between the client and the practitioner. The reason is, I think you, as a client, you go to a service on the whole because you want that service. You want what the practitioner can offer you. So you accept to a degree, though, that slight change in power dynamics. Having said that, the power dynamics doesn't have to be what defines the relationship or what the service that's going to be provided by the practitioner or for the client. It will, I mean, so long as we can get from A to B successfully, how we got there doesn't matter so much as getting that end result. But they're always going to be, there's different dynamics between the boss and someone who's more junior to the boss. That is life.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I'm going to hand back to AD in a moment just to check whether there are things in the Q&A box that I haven't picked up in the last 5 minutes or so. But just before I do that, Claire, not to leave you out of the Q&A session, I did pick up one question, which was about the role of emergency duty teams in order to prevent homelessness when somebody might be being discharged from hospital.
Yes, thank you for that. Hang on, I'm just going to get rid of, right, yes, I'm not muted. This is a very familiar topic for us, and it's been particularly challenging during the pandemic. And what I say is the first thing is that practitioners need to really understand what has brought the person here and what they need, and also to understand what they want, because it's not unusual for someone to sort of say, oh, we must help so-and-so, but actually nobody's talked to that person and found out what it is that they really feel they need and what and are happy to accept. So that would be the first thing. And the second thing, which I think practitioners need to do, is be conscious about what is possible and what the different routes are to providing resources, particularly housing resources when somebody is in A&E, so that you don't set people up to expect something which is just not going to happen, because I just think that's unfair. You have to be realistic in terms of what you can offer and be sending people in the right direction. And the last thing is actually being tenacious, because sometimes you've just got to keep on pressing it and be willing to advocate to the right people in the right part of the system about why they meet the criteria and should be helped. It isn't unusual, unfortunately, for some people with mental health problems to not get the help they're entitled to because the system, for whatever reason, is not recognising the additional needs that they have. And I think that sometimes tenacity in having somebody like a social worker say, actually, I know this person meets the criteria, and this is why they meet the criteria, and this is why you have a duty to house, can be quite helpful. But it's an ongoing battle. It's been an issue for as long as I've been a social worker, and that's sadly been quite a long time. Not sadly, actually. Couldn't think of another career I'd rather have. But I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Okay, Adi, back to you. I noticed that there was an observation in the Q&A that at least one person has struggled to find where the presentations and the recordings are on the LGA website.
And colleagues have put the link up on the local.gov.uk/events/past event-presentation. So hopefully people can access that. And indeed, somebody asked whether they could share the recordings. And my answer is yes, 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 and yes, on the basis of reinforcing what colleagues have already said about the importance, particularly I think of this session, in terms of getting the messages out there. Because actually, in terms of that last bit of conversation about jargon and language, I think the same themes have come through again and again through these 8 sessions, and I'll come to that in a minute. But hearing them described today without jargon, in very simple, straightforward language from people with lived experience, is probably the most powerful thing that anybody in any team can do with their colleagues. Actually, I would say regardless to how much contact they have with people who are homeless, because I think the point that was made several times is it's about shifting attitudes, hearts and minds across the board, as well as, because we do have, I think, a bit of a risk, particularly around safeguarding, that safeguarding is seen as something quite specialist and unique and understood perhaps professionally in quite a narrow way, whereas safeguarding more broadly, which I think has come through this session very strongly, is everybody's business in the way that we would argue as a mantra again and again. So I would really encourage people who are present today to use the recordings in their teams with their colleagues. And that's one of the reasons we made a kind of condition of doing this work, I think, Michael, that we would record it, not even realizing how many people would actually turn up, but wanting this to be a resource. So creating a resource for people to use, so it doesn't just stand for today, but it's there to be used for colleagues in the future. So please, 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 please use this as a resource. So I'm going to move on and try and find the final presentation that says, what are we going to do next? Where's it gone? Yeah. And so this is just talking about where we've come from, the next steps for Michael and I. So this slide just captures the 8 workshops that we've had since December through to today is the last workshops that have covered a whole range of issues that colleagues said they would welcome a focus on, and hopefully they've been helpful to the people, the hundreds and hundreds of people who've actually dialed in. This slide tries to capture some of the cross-cutting themes that have come through. So we wanted to look at what COVID has done, and I think it's brought huge challenges, but also opportunities that we know what works, which is that wraparound support, the car with all the 4 wheels that Carl talked about, that helps somebody resolve the multiple issues that they have in their lives, helps them move forward. There's also a huge amount of helpful tools and resources that are available to support people, and those have been described and explored during the series of webinars. It is a complex area when we come to look at the legal interfaces, the different statutory frameworks, and we had some really helpful contributions to support what's called legal literacy, so to support people understanding the law better and then supporting practice. But I'd say that the law and the legal frameworks have been threaded through and been referred to a number of times. Today, I think the importance of relational working, or relationships being how we help people and how we change and how we help other people to change, has been a really common theme coming through. There's been quite a bit at different points in the 8 seminars around how commissioning can help changing the way people commission services. There's been some themes about how people are looked after in terms of the workers who are doing this area of work and what support they might need. The theme of continuous learning from evidence and practice has been talked about today in a number of the presentations about we needing to learn continuously from people who we work with and from the evidence and from research. And the final point, which I think has been writ very large this afternoon, is the importance and the power of the voice of people with lived experience, and how, as has been said this afternoon, that needs to inform change and drive change at all levels, not just at the front line in terms of individual people's change, but strategically and policy as well as practice. Michael, did you want to add to any of the kind of cross-cutting themes we've got on here, and before I go on to the next slide?
No, I don't think so, AD. I think you've captured what we've identified so far, and we'll no doubt do much more analysis as we prepare the second briefing for publication later in the year. So no, move on.
So moving on to what you've just described. So where are we going with this? This is the last of the 8 webinars. The idea was that we would collect information through these webinars to update the first briefing, to provide information on, as people have said today, we know what works. COVID has helped and hindered. It's both been a positive and negative impact, but we'll hopefully be able to describe some of that. And in organising these webinars, we've hopefully created some new resources, both the slides that people have used from all the presentations, but as I've said, the recordings from the webinars that are available. And this in itself creates resources for people to use, and I'd really encourage people to use them. That's what we've done it for. My final comment really is what else? And Michael, maybe you would put out a plea for further contributions to help with the briefing, but anything else that people think might be useful, please let us know. I'm going to hand over to you, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely, AD. The more examples of positive practice that we have from people, the better. I shall be drafting the briefing end of March through April. So if anyone still here today has got examples of positive practice they would like to see in the briefing, could they please send them to me or to you, Adi? I think my email address is quite accessible on the University of Bedfordshire website, and maybe in one or two other places too. So yeah, do let us have examples of positive practice, please.
Thank you. So we'll continue to collect examples as in the process of doing the final briefing. So I just want to wrap up now and say thank you to all our speakers. Really fantastic session. Really, really inspirational and really powerful, and hopefully will have an impact further than the people who were able to join us today. Thank you also to the LGA staff who've supported these webinars and who's the support staff who've been really helpful, including recording them. Thank you to Michael, who has led on commissioning and organising and sorting out these sessions and the speakers, without whom this wouldn't have happened, as well as for the first briefing and drafting the second one. Just a reminder that the presentations and briefings are on the LGA website. The one from today will be available by the end of the week. And that also we're going to send you a short survey to ask you what you thought of today's event, because we use this to inform how we plan future events. So finally, great thanks to everybody who's joined us today, speakers, participants, and those of you who put questions in. Apologies if we haven't answered them all. Thank you so much, and stay safe out there. Good luck, best wishes, and thank you all. Bye-bye.